Well, thank you, Megan, for the introduction, and thank you organizers for letting me present this work remotely. And I'll be talking about wavefront sensing and control for Gemini Planet Imagers Calibration Unit 2. Before I move on, I would like to share that I'll be joining Gemini North as an AO scientist in coming months, and one of my blanking out. One of my roles will be to work as an instrumentation scientist for GPI 2.0, and I'm really looking forward to working with some of you directly. All right, so thanks to Jeff for giving this excellent talk on explaining Gemini Planet Imager and talking about its upgrade and also sharing what kind of science GPI 2.0 will enable. I'll focus on the calibration unit, the upgrade of calibration unit, which we are doing at HAA. And Cal unit is basically the high contrast imaging. It will provide the high contrast imaging capability to GPI 2.0. And it's the second stage unit, which is going to correct for quasi-static speckles and also address post-AO residuals upstream of the IFS. So I'm just going to focus on Cal2, the Cal subsystem of GPI 2.0. All right, so here is just schematic of what Cal unit looked like for GPI 1.0 and what it's going to look like for 2.0. So in GPI, the Cal unit was a dual arm interferometer, and basically GPI, this Cal unit was designed to address the vibration, which it was not able to do properly. So GPI 1 was not able to achieve the contrast which it was designed for. So the Cal 2 that we are developing for GPI, we are actually, it's a common path interferometer. So it's fed by the GPI 2 AO. And the focal plane mask is basically gonna send the light to the science beam splitter, which is gonna split the light between the GPI to IFS, and the rest of the light will go to the Cal2 science path, which is, as I said, it's a common path interferometer. And so we'll be using self-coherent camera as a focal plane wavefront sensor to suppress speckles, and we'll also be using a Lofus, which is a low order wavefront sensor, to correct for pointing errors and well, not only pointing errors, but other low order aberrations as well. So the goal of this talk is to introduce how Lofus and SCC works and how it's gonna help GPI 2.0 to achieve the desired contrast. So before I move on, I just want to mention the Cal2. We just want to show the organizational chart for Cal2. It's an effort led by NRC, and the PI is Christian Marwa. And Cal2 is basically, we have people working from HAA, both national and international partners, mostly from the US and France. And you can go through Christian's SPI paper to know more about Cal2 in detail. All right, so this is the core team at HAA, which is actually doing the groundwork for Cal2. So here, this is our lab, which we call New Earth Lab, and that's where we are actually setting up all the optical elements and testing both Lofus and SCC, trying to make both of these sensors work together and test the technology in the lab. So I'll be presenting results from New Earth Lab. And this is the conceptual optical design for Cal2. And I'm not going to focus too much time on this one, but here is just to show you that the light from the GPI 2 AO is coming from this side here. And the blue light path is the GPI 2.0 science path, which is not going to be affected by our upgrade. And Cal2 upgrade is what is shown in this yellow science path, which is going to go to the Saphira detector, which we will use for focal plane wavefront sensing. And the one in the red path is basically going to go to the CRED2 camera, which we're going to use for the lower wavefront sensing. So the Cal2 upgrade is not going to affect the GPI 2 science path, which is going to go towards the IFS. So before I focus on explaining how the Lofus and SCC works in Cal2, I just want to mention that the Wavefront quality that is provided by the adaptive optics correction is not sufficient for high contrast imaging of exoplanets. So here I list some of the causes that basically it's a list that showing the explaining what causes the residual aberrations in posterior regime. So if you look at the dynamical errors, we have low order aberrations, which basically make the starlight move around your coronagraph. And then you have non-common path aberrations. They happen because the wavefront sensing channel is different than science imaging channel. And then when you take the system on sky, then you have other errors, for example, aliasing, fitting error, low wind effect, wind-driven halo. So this is just an example from another instrument called Sphere. And this is how the images look like when you have, I think this one is for aliasing, this one is for wind-driven halo, and this is for low wind effect. So all of these state-of-the-art high contrast imaging instruments are affected by these errors. And that is why instruments like GPI has been able to provide a raw contrast limit of 10 to the power -4 to -5 at large separation. And that is why GPI was able to image only the self-luminous young extrasolar giant planets. And with the Cal2 upgrade, this contrast limit, we're going to be improving this contrast limit by at least a factor of 10 to enable imaging of Jovian-like exoplanet at small angles. So let's look into how Cal2 is going to actually address low order aberrations and non-common path aberrations. And before I explain how these two sensors work, let's just look at the optical layout of a coronographic system. So here, it's just an example with a TMT pupil. So at the entrance pupil, you have the AO-corrected light coming from right. And at the focal plane, if you don't have a coronograph, then most of the light, well, all of the light, the starlight or the planet light is going through inside the pupil. When you add a coronograph, which is there to suppress the light of the star, then most of the starlight is diffracted outside of the geometrical pupil. And then in the re-image pupil plane, we use something which is called Leo stop, which blocks the residual starlight it's preventing the residual starlight to go into your science camera. So so in the posterior regime, these instruments, such instruments, basically, they suffer from low order aberrations, and they are caused by alignment errors, chromatic errors, vibration, thermal distortion, temperature variations. And these errors basically make your starlight dance around the coronographic mask. Here is a video from Speckle instrument at Subaru, an on-sky video, which is showing this is a coronograph here, and because of the low order aberrations, your star is no longer aligned with the coronograph. So there exists a low order wavefront sensor, which I actually developed during my PhD. And this Lofus was especially developed to address low order aberration for coronographic PSF. So if you look at the re-image pupil plane here, Leo stop, in the conventional coronographic system, this Leo stop is opaque, but in this Lofus concept, this Leo stop was made reflective. So instead of simply blocking the starlight, this Leo stop was sending most of the starlight towards another channel. And this is just an image of a low order PSF. And you can actually use the single PSF to measure the low order aberrations. If you want to know more about how it actually works, you can ask me questions on Slack, because I'm not going to be discussing how this single image is used to do the low order wavefront sensing. So this is a well-proven technique. Lofus was able to close the loop on sky on the Speckle instrument. Here is a video of Lofus in action. When you close the loop with Lofus, and the star is aligned well behind the coronograph. So on the New Earth lab, we will be using pupil plane images for Lofus, and this is what Cal2 will use too. So in this setup, we use a special coronograph, which instead of simply blocking the starlight, it makes most of the starlight go through a different channel called reference channel in the Leo plane. This is the signal seen by the Lofus. So we'll be using pupil plane Lofus sensing. So you can use actually this full frame or just the frame or just a signal around the reference pupil to do the low order wavefront sensing. So here are some results from the New Earth lab. So here, this is a reference image in simulation, and this is the lab image. And for this Lofus, you actually need to calibrate the system. So you apply tip tilt and other Zernike aberration, and you see the response of the sensor. So here I show the response of the sensor to different Zernike modes in simulation and here in the lab. So for testing Lofus on our lab, I applied GPI 2.0 residuals on the DM, and then I closed the loop. So here I basically show the open loop residuals and the closed loop residuals for different modes. And I also implemented model gain optimization with Lofus. And this is just a result for tip mode. So in all of these graphs, the x-axis shows the frequency and the y-axis, and this one shows the PST for tip mode, cumulative standard deviation in the middle one, and the rejection transfer function in the last plot here. This is basically just to give you an idea that Lofus, be it focal plane wavefront sensing with the Lofus or the pupil plane wavefront sensing with the Lofus, it works and it does its job, suppressing the low order, correcting the low order aberrations. So hopefully that's what we will be able to do for Cal 2 as well. All right, now moving on to the non-common path aberrations. So as I said, they happen because your sensing channel is different than your science imaging path. And if you look at a typical long exposure coronographic image, it has basically three components. It has a smooth halo, which basically in long exposure, these fast moving speckles, they average out and they add a smooth halo while adding photo noise to your detection. Then you have static speckles that you can correct in differential imaging. And the real problem is the quasi-static speckles because they evolve during the entire observing sequence. And the non-common path aberrations, which evolve during your observing sequence, they are the one that cause quasi-static speckles to evolve, and that is essentially why the current high contrast imaging instruments, including GPI, is limited by speckle noise. So one way to correct for non-common path aberration is to use the science image itself as a focal plane wavefront sensor, and one such sensor is called a self-coherent camera. So here we have the optical layout again, and let's focus on the Leo pupil here. And so this is, as I said, is the signal seen by the Lofus. And this coronagraph at the focal plane, this focal plane mask basically sends most of the starlight to the reference channel here. So what will happen in the science camera in this setup is that you will have some of the starlight going through the reference channel, and some will go through your main pupil because of diffraction. And what you will see is fringes in your science focal plane. So SCC basically make use of these fringes to measure the electric field of speckles. So in this case, only your speckles will be fringed because they are coherent with the starlight, and your planet won't be fringed. So in this case, it's a simulated planet, and it's only the starlight which is fringed, but not the speckles. And SCC can use this information to measure the electric field of speckles and then apply the correction on the deformable mirror to suppress these speckles in real time. And I'm not gonna talk about how SCC does it. Again, if you have questions, please ask me on the Slack. I'll directly show you closing the loop with SCC on the New Earth lab. So here we are closing the loop and creating a dark hole on the quasi-static, and quasi-static speckles, especially under the, I think this is under the local lab turbulence. So here, this is a fringed image, unfringed image, and when we close the loop, in a couple of seconds, we can dig a dark hole, thus creating a region of high contrast. And in the lab, we have been able to show a contrast of roughly 10 to the power -7 beyond 5 lambda on the region. And we have also implemented coherent differential imaging. So if you look at this case here, it's a typical image that you get on sky. It's dominated by speckles. There is no SCC correction here. And we have added a speckle and, we added a disk and a planet, a fake disk and a planet in this image. You close the loop with SCC, you start to see some more details. And then when you implement coherent differential imaging, then you can actually subtract out the residual speckle which were not addressed by SEC actively. And with the differential imaging, you gain a factor of 20 to 40 in the contrast. So hopefully the goal is to actually be able to do this on Sky with Cal2 when it's going to go on GPI 2.0.
Right? You're at time.
Okay, all right. So just take 1 minute. Here, what I'm showing is the simulations with a Subaru telescope pupil. We're actually developing SPIDER's instrument, which is the pathfinder for the Cal2. So SPIDER's will demonstrate what Cal2 will be able to achieve when it's going to go to GPI 2.0. And in the simulation, when I close the loop with Lofus and SEC, we are able to dig a similar kind of dark hole, reaching the level of 10 to the power minus 7. And I'll stop here. This is my conclusion slide, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.